Hi everyone, so the last Epoch Season 3 hype train is slowly starting up and I decided to log in again and blast a little bit to Unrust and get a bit of a feel for the Acolyte class. This is actually a build I have created like 4 years ago or something like that. That was my second character ever in this game. It was a Harvest Reaper form Lich. And I decided to kind of try that again now, like that I know more about the game, with like the current patch and all that, just to kind of warm up for the new season. Since Acolyte is getting big reworks in this upcoming patch, we don't have the final patch notes yet as of the recording of this video, but I just wanted to get familiar with it again, and I haven't really done that much on the Acolyte. And this is one of those coolest archetypes in the game, I feel. It's probably not one of the strongest really, but it gets the job done. So I have not been able to like fully push this into endgame, unfortunately. I didn't have that much time, but I leveled all the way from level 1 to somewhere in the 70s and 80s, and it was doing fine, especially like after like level 65 or so. You kind of have all of the pieces of the puzzle that are important, and then it really started ramping, and I started like basically one-shotting packs and actually having pretty good boss damage. Before that, it was a little bit clunky going through the campaign, because sometimes you have like kind of like long zones where you just kind of run and you don't really do much, and this build is mostly designed around continuous combat, continuous attacking, and you constantly like lose life, and then at some point when you run out of life, you transform back into a normal form, and you want to avoid that at all costs by leeching from attacks. So you in monoliths this is okay, but in the campaign a little bit weird. So maybe you want to level up with something else, like a spellcaster, you know, maybe leveling build for Maxwell, for example. And I'm not sure exactly what they have, but at the very least, once you're in endgame, you have the full combo, and then you properly stay in the Reaper form basically all the time, and you can actually deal pretty good damage. And just to give a bit of an idea, my character right now has absolute potato gear, and I'm actually, you know, one-tapping rare elites, and even bosses die relatively fast. So just to give you a bit of like an overview of what I'm actually doing here, this is really like trash that I just picked up basically. This is not winged out at all. I don't have anything on the Circle of Fortune yet, and these kind of things. So this is just kind of what we are working with here, and I'm level 74 right now, just about to enter Empowered Monoliths. On the upside, I just spent like 1.5 hours or so finalizing the filter, so I'll also have that linked down in the description. And in general, if you're ever looking for any of my builds, I do have the LE Moody Builds channel here. This is on my Discord, and you can find this here. So I also put all the stuff there, so I just recently added this. These are the builds that I played earlier in the season, and yeah, they're still kind of like the same since it's still season 2. And here I made a fresh planner, a fresh filter, and this works from level 1 all the way basically. So you can use that and just start blasting if you also want to warm up a little bit for the next season with a fun build to try. And here's my planner. This is also going to be linked. So I made like kind of like an end game setup, nothing super crazy, but you know, quite achievable if you grind it out a little bit. And before that, you know, mostly just kind of like use rares. So I also have like good rares on the filter, for example, and those filters will eventually turn off after a certain level, for example, or you can just click the check mark when this item slot is already done, for example. So this just gives you a bit of an idea of where to go once you get some uniques with a bit of legendary potential. What to slam and what to really go for. I'm going to talk you through this as well. Also, you have the progression slider here, so I put the points pretty much in order of where I would spend them. But again, keep in mind, if you're watching this in Season 3, for example, the Acolyte tree is about to change a little bit, so we probably would tweak this stuff a little bit. I also expect there might be some tweaks to some of the actual skills. There might be certain like fresh out nodes, or maybe even new passives or reworked passives. So in general, I expect this stuff to get stronger next patch anyway. So it's also part of the reason why I wanted to try it out now. And the same goes for the skills here. So they are also in a point order of where you want to allocate all these points here. So you can go check this out as well. As you progress, I also have them in the right specialization order, the way that I did it with my character here. So you can kind of follow along when you make a fresh start. Now let's talk a little bit about how this build actually works. So we have our main skill here. This is Harvest. This is a melee swing. It looks like this here. And this is going to be our main attack. It benefits greatly from cursing enemies with Bone Curse. So this is this here. This is a skill that you get very early. And you just want to cast this into a pack and then kind of swing at them, because it does double damage against cursed enemies. So this is why we use the Bone Curse for that. And there's one nice note here, which is the Cursed Limbs, which allows us to continuously apply Bone Cursed 5 seconds after casting it. So you just kind of cast it once in a while, you go around swinging and maybe teleport to the next pack, and then at some point you have to do another curse, but everything else will always just be cursed when you hit them with the swing. Then we have the Reaper form. So this is the transformation that we do here. So this gives us a bunch of extra damage buffs, but it also drains all of our life over time, and it disables health regen. So the only way to heal effectively is Leech. So you want to try to invest a little bit in Lich, which is easily done, thankfully, with the tree here. So there's like some Lich passes, for example, that you unlock later. In the early game, you can also do this with some roles like melee Lich on your weapon or on your glove or something like that. There's a bunch of Lich item affixes you can go for until you unlock this, but later this is totally fine. But the thing is that you kind of have to like hit something every few seconds or so, because Lich only lasts, I think, 3 seconds in Last Epoch. So as long as you hit something every 3 seconds, you'll kind of stay at full life. But then when you stop attacking, you will kind of like slowly lose your life. So this is kind of like how the Reaper form works. And when you are at 0 life, you will drop out of the Reaper form, and then you have a cooldown of 18 seconds. So you want to avoid this at all costs. So the idea is that we get to the point where we are fast enough, we're leech enough, that we can stay in Reaper form all the time. And you see here, boom, now it's on cooldown and we do much less damage. We can kill stuff still, but I wouldn't really try to fight like champions or a boss or something like that in this form. And you generally just squishier, weaker, and so on. So you try to avoid the downtime as much as possible. Another thing you may have noticed is that even in human form, my life actually slowly drains. I actually have almost no life now. And this is thanks to some of those passives here as well. So this just has current health drained per second. So it's this, for example, you get 2 in per point, but it drains your life. And there's also this here, for example, a very powerful passive that does kind of the same. And well, then the Reaper form on top of that also drains your life and turns off your health regen. So Leech is really like the only way to really sustain this. But there is also the Death Seal, and this is a very important piece of the puzzle as well, because that actually disables the life drain. So I'm going to show this off here. When I press Potion now and then press Death Seal, you see here I stay at exactly 515 life. So we can't really go above that life. It puts us to exactly 33%. This is part of one of the nodes here on the Death Seal, which is this one, but it also removes this life drain. So this gives you kind of like a bit of like a leeway to, for example, you know, go and traverse like longer corridors towards the boss, or, you know, go into a corner, loot a chest, go backwards. And on top of that, Death Seal is also just a very powerful nuke tool. So you want to try to activate this as often as possible, especially in boss fights or against champions and exiled mages and these kind of things. So this is where this thing really shines. So you might be wondering, oh my god, how do I even survive with only like 1/3 of my life because of this node here? But well, first of all, it turns off the drain, so you kind of stay at that 1/3 even if you're not leeching, which is very nice. And it also gives you extra damage reduction based on how little life you have. So you deal more damage equal to the percent of the missing health. So in this case, you get a 67% damage buff multiplicatively, and it takes less damage equal to half of your missing health. So in this case, when we're at 33%, 67 divided by 2, we take like 33% less damage. And on top of that, we are pretty close to our endurance range, actually. So endurance is a very powerful mechanic here, where we can reduce the incoming damage by 60% for almost all of our damage taken effectively. Since we have so little after activating the Death Seal, you have a baseline 20% endurance threshold. Death Seal puts you at 33%. So if you get a little bit of extra endurance threshold, which is actually possible thanks to either some rolls on the gear, or there's also a chest armor that allows to do that, which is the Revenant plate here that has extra maximum health gained as endurance threshold, for example. So there's various ways of boosting endurance threshold and the endurance percent to the point where you just have a lot of damage reduction actually while you are staying at very low life. And the good part is that you out-leech everything that doesn't kill us instantly anyway, because the way that leech works in Last Epoch is actually pretty OP, which is when you have an effect like the health drain, for example, then you actually cannot fully heal up to maximum HP, and your leech will continuously keep going. So usually leech effects are removed when you reach full life. But in the case of this drain mechanic here, for example, especially when your death seal is off, then you start to drain again, and you can actually just hit something once every 3 seconds and your life will always stay full, basically. And this pretty much describes the main mechanic, the main gameplay loop. You can also, for example, use your potion sometimes between packs to just like fill up your health again. But basically, the longer you stay in the Reaper form, the more it drains your HP. But with the Death Seal, you basically stop that. And you can also heal up a little bit with some effects that are not leech. For example, I have a node here on the transplant where it creates these blood puddles here and they actually heal you a little bit. So that's another way to do this, for example. But yeah, you see that it kind of like slowly drains the life, and you know, normally would be like swinging at stuff, and then as soon as you swing at something, our HP goes boop, back to full basically, and we don't have to worry about this. Another cool thing about Reaper's form is also that not only do you revert back to human form, but it actually also happens when you would otherwise die. So you can actually take like big hits and big one-shots, and then instead of actually dying, you just revert back to human form, and then it goes on cooldown. So you might lose a bunch of power, and you're going to be a bit squishier and so on for a little while, but well, at least you don't have to go again, basically. So this can be really useful in some boss fights to just like, you know, stand in something or do a mistake, and you can get out of that. And the last skill that we have on the bar here is Transplant. So you don't necessarily have to specialize into this, but I didn't really find like many other good options anyway, so I just did that. It does give us Frenzy and Haste, which is kind of nice. There's a bunch of like cooldown, less health cost. There's Bone Armor, which is an 8% damage reduction, so this is kind of neat as well. So you want to try to like just transplant, teleport around. It also goes pretty far, and it has these blood puddles here that are just shown here. Some other noteworthy effects that we get is the Vile Shroud. This is on the Reaper form, so at least like later in the campaign or like in early monoliths, you will get this node, which gives you effectively all of the necrotic and all of the poison res you will ever need. So you can actually completely skip those two mechanics. On top of this, you will see that there is actually a lot of like increased damage here. For example, already on this tree, and also like on the Acolyte tree, there's a bunch of extra like percent increased damage values, to the point where we don't really care that much about adding more like percent necrotic damage or more percent melee damage to our build, but we rather focus on other scalars. For example, attack speed and crit. So we actually want to try to hit 100% crit chance. We have, for example, this node here, and also Harvest itself has this here very powerful 9% base crit. So this puts it to 14% base, and that is obviously really good and very easy to scale up to all the way to 100% crit chance, which is what I have done on my planner as well. Another noteworthy mention here is that we really want weapons that have kind of like a baseline melee damage, because that will adapt to the skill that we're using. So Harvest is a necrotic skill, and it does necrotic damage, and other flat values just don't really get the same benefits. You can do that, especially like in a campaign. You don't necessarily have the option to go for the damage type you want. In fact, necrotic damage as a flat damage value doesn't even exist on weapons. So poison and necrotic are excluded. There's only the other elements. So you want to have like a very high baseline melee damage weapon, basically. And you also get a lot of flat damage from the skill itself. So per point of int, you get +1 melee necrotic damage as well added to the skill. So at least later on you have a lot of int, and I think my planner goes to like 130 int or something like that. So you can get a lot of flat damage just from that, because we have a lot of stuff like this here on the tree as well. And you can attribute stack a little bit. And besides those stats that I just mentioned, you can also see this setup here, which is kind of like the, form that I would like to go for. So there's a few kind of key items that you really want to get. One is the Death's Embrace. This is actually a weapon pretty much designed for Harvest. So you see here, there's a lot of melee necrotic damage. There's a necrotic pen on it. There's the reduced bonus damage taken from crits. And so you want to try to get one more roll or something like that somewhere in order to have 100% on this. And then you also have this Harrowing Claim effect, where I can't show it now, but every 3 swings, basically, you get a 200% bonus and a 100% area of effect bonus. So that's going to feel really good as you kind of swing into a pack, and maybe at an elite or something. Every once in a while, you get like a really huge one, and that just destroys everything. But it also makes it cost mana, so we can offset that with this mana gained when you use Harvest node here. Usually, Harvest actually doesn't cost any mana, so the only way to really spend mana on this build is the Bone Curse, and that easily comes back in time, because you just cast it like once every 6 seconds or something like that. with the node that I've shown you earlier. So the mana sustain is very easy, but once you have this item, you also want to have this harvest mana gain node basically, or maybe a little bit of mana regen. So one or the other in order to offset that cost. And then as you see here, we have the Titan Heart. You can also go for a Null Portent, which is a very powerful chest, but when you have a two-handed melee weapon, then this is like kind of like the king basically. It's very easy to get 2 LP on this thing. Even 3 LP is realistic if you really try, but you need quite some grinding for this. But it has a Giga life. It has, you know, easy 2 LP potential. It has the damage reduction. So this is just really neat. I put in the Decayed Skull here. So this is also really easy to get with at least 2, maybe even 3 LP. And here we get void and necrotic damage taken as physical, which makes the armor more effective basically. So that's kind of neat. It also gives you more armor, and armor mitigation applies to dots. So this is really powerful. Actually, some people have also used this against the Uber Barrel, for example. You usually want to have a bit of dot reduction here. Even with like this Lich kind of continuously going, it's really nice to have this dot damage reduction. For the amulet, there's nothing really crazy. I just put a swine there, but anything that has good stats kind of works. You can also put other unique amulets there if you get like 1 or 2 LP on them. There can be an Omnis, there can be a Nihilis if you get one. An Orion's Eye. There's a bunch of options here that would work. I mostly have this for the attributes here because it makes the red rings easier. So for the rings, I have those. Obviously, they're a bit tough to get, but eventually you can grind them out with enough prophecies. For example, you just spam ring prophecies, and roughly every 200k favor, you will get one of those rings, and then you can start printing them from the Weaver tree. So this is what I have done earlier in the season, and that worked pretty well. But it's not required, so you can also just put like any other rings there that have good stats, or some, you know, legendary like 2-3 LP ring, for example, and you're gonna be fine. There is, for example, also the Doom ring. So this is the Siphon of Anguish from Orobis. So this is also not a bad idea here to maybe include. So you get the Doom mechanic. You also have the Leech, the movement speed, kind of nice. And Doom gives you 16% more damage as well. So it's kind of nice to have. And that would also allow a combo, for example, with the belt that you can get from Orobis, yeah. So, which is the Shattered Chains. So there's also really good stats on that thing. The extra armor, melee damage, more damage per doom. So this is pretty nice in order to boost your, especially boss damage once you stack this up a little bit. But yeah, late game, you really want to get the red rings, I think. They have this nice extra attributes. They have the rest. They just kind of like everything is figured out, basically. And less damage taken. They have movement speed. You really want movement speed in order to, you know, go from pack to pack more easily and not run out of health, for example. So I really wanted to include those here, and you want to try to farm those up. Similar with the boots, they're mostly here for the Giga movement speed. So Blood of the Exile is just really good for that. And they also have really good stats. We benefit pretty well from strength, dex, and int for this build. So you get like insane speed with that. And lastly here, gloves. I don't really have anything crazy. So I just put like Giga melee attack speed and then a bunch of useful stats. And same with the relic here. So just didn't really find like a very good option that I wanted to put here as a unique. So I just have this. It has necrotic damage on it. The extra ranks to harvest are pretty good, so I want to try to work on that. Similar with the extra ranks to Reaper form, there are a bunch of really strong skill points to pick up, basically. So having those tier 7 mods here that you can get with like Rune of Havoc, for example, you can relatively easily make these kind of items where you have like this one tier 7 mod that you want, and you can then, for legendaries especially, slam it in there. But also here, this shouldn't be that crazy hard to get with like one good mod. So yeah, this is kind of like the endgame setup that I would be shooting for here. I'm definitely excited to maybe try this out when I have more time and more gear, and then go for something like this here. And well, with season 3 coming up, then I'll probably like revamp this a little bit. There's probably like some new items that you can include. You have to like check the skill tree again and so on. There might be a few things on the passives. So we'll see. But for now, this is what I got here. I had a ton of fun with this, and it's just like a really cool, flavorful build. It's just like really fun to try out, and really gave me like a very good feeling trying to play this and prepare for season 3 with this, playing a Lich. So I'm gonna leave you with that. Hope you enjoyed my guide. Wish you good luck with last Epoch, with the upcoming season. I'm also gonna be blasting that when I can. I'll be a little bit late, unfortunately, because I'm at Gamescom, so I will actually start my season on the 22nd, but I'll be here, and I'll also be putting out some more videos, so stay tuned for that. Other than that, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.